Throughout Nevada, a wide range of folk arts are thriving, from traditional arts and crafts to some you've probably never heard of. I'm Gwen Clancy for the Nevada Department of Cultural Affairs, and today on Exploring Nevada, we'll take a closer look into several of these art forms. Our journey begins in Carson City at the main office of the Nevada Arts Council, where Folklife Program Coordinator Jeannie Hara Johnson is documenting the state's diverse heritage. Jeannie, the Arts Council supports a lot of different kinds of arts. What is it that defines folk arts?
Well, folk arts, I can give you kind of a laundry list of the genres and give you some examples. First of all, folk arts includes things such as storytelling or personal narrative. That goes all the way back to fairy tales and folk tales, legends, all kinds of anecdotes, limericks. So narrative is really broad. It also includes things such as a lot of different kinds of crafts. For instance, quilting is a particular kind of craft. Rawhide braiding, horsehair braiding, you name it. There's just so many kinds of crafts. Paper cutting. Also folk music, folk song, drama, theater. These are all traditional drama and theater, not just, learned performances. Ritual, celebration, architecture, as a matter of fact, all kinds of material culture, foodways, including recipes, the way that people use food on special occasions, recipes that are passed down over time, the presentation of food. So it just includes almost everything you can imagine. Folk or traditional arts are different from other kinds of arts for a number of reasons. One is that they're always learned and always reflect shared values within a community or a group. So even though an individual may produce the art itself, and it has an individual signature, so to speak, their mold or creativity in there, it's always born out of a community or a group, such as an ethnic group. It could be a job, occupational group. It could be a region, a local area, any kind of community, and that's where the thing is actually learned and passed on and developed. It's also learned informally. So very rarely is it learned in school or by books, although that can enhance the folk art, but most of the time it's learned face-to-face. As well, it's always traditional, and by that I mean that it has a time depth. It doesn't have to have a long time depth. Some of them do. Washoe Indian, a lot of native arts have a huge time depth, centuries old. Others, such as legends about the Doberman Pinscher or something that you've heard recently, still have a time depth, and that's really important to defining folk art. Another one of the defining units of folk art is that it often was or still is functional. It's a thing of beauty, but for instance, basketry, the baskets were all used in Native American communities, and over time they aren't used anymore. People go and buy baskets or buy pots and pans like all the rest of us, but they used to have a function. They were only used, and then they became more a thing of beauty, more ornate, more elaborate, and so over time there's a process of removing them from just a functional aspect to a beautiful sort of object. Of course, quilts, the whole purpose of them is to keep one warm, and that's it, to put it on your bed, to snuggle up underneath it. But look at this. It's an exquisite piece of art. It is a thing of beauty. And that's how things change over time. They may have started out just fairly plain, and pretty soon they become more and more elaborate. And it's not just the colors. These are symbols. This quilt is called the chief quilt. And it's, as I said, made by a Native American. And it's out of the old star patterns that were introduced by Europeans to Native Americans. And then it grew into a chief quilt. So you can see that it still could be used. You could put it on your bed and use it, but look at this, and they're usually anonymous. You don't know who started a particular song, who did a particular dance. If there's a Filipino dance or some other kind of dance, it's almost impossible to trace it back to who originally did it. And another interesting part of folk art is that oftentimes the artist doesn't consider themselves an artist. They're doing this, it's a very organic process. They're learning it in all the ways that I just described to you, and they're passing it on, but they don't think of themselves as artists until you recognize them, and then they see that not everyone around them does it, and it's very distinct.
You have a photograph of an older man teaching a younger person.
This is Larry and John Schutte, and you can see he's teaching his son this. And it may be kind of difficult to see some of the detail, but this is a process that goes from actually grooming the horse, and the horse's mane and tail hairs come out, and they clean the mane and tail hairs, and they separate the colors, and then they actually weave them and braid them together. And you can imagine how long this takes, and that's another thing about a lot of folk art. It's often the process and the preparation. It's not something final. You don't buy the goods in a store, you don't hang the painting on a wall. It's a whole process from the very beginning to actually getting the final product.
Being a folklorist from somewhere else, what is exciting to you about being in Nevada?
Nevada is remarkable. What I love is that the history and the heritage here is palpable. So you go out onto the ranches and you have these huge spreads of land, and you have, you tap into the heritage right there just by driving across it. And if you get to communicate with the people and to see what they're doing, then you find out that these people raise cattle. They don't just eat the cattle, they take the hides, they strip the hides, they make every piece of the gear for a horse. They make saddles, they decorate the saddles, they engrave the saddles, they do silversmithing. So they actually make every piece of what the gear for the cowboys, the ranchers, the cowgirls that goes into it. And they do these during the times, for instance, in the winter when there's not as much to do but just feeding the cattle. But things, the calves aren't being born, they're not having to do as much horsemanship, but they're able to go out and do these different kinds of artistic pieces. But again, they take it from way back, from the very piece of getting the rawhide to making the art piece that's actually used.
Coming up next, we'll meet one of Nevada's legendary rawhide workers.
Get a job.
Look, it's a giraffe!
I don't see it.
The less art kids get, the more it shows. Are yours getting enough? Art. Ask for more. AmericansForTheArts.org.
Lige Langston grew up on a homestead north of Reno and spent his life buckarooing around the West. With no stores nearby, he learned to fashion his own equipment out of the materials at hand, hide and hair. Eventually, Lige quit riding the range, but until his death, he continued to turn out gear that was sought by cowboys and collectors alike. We were fortunate to chronicle his story in a documentary funded by the National Endowment for the Arts.
You think you can use this hide?
Well, yeah, it looks like a good enough hide just looking at it. This looks like it might have been off of a heifer or something, but probably died of calving or some darn thing. Now, they tell me this old Ortega down here, Red Bluff country, gets yearling hides and jerseys if you can get them. He likes them the best. They're thin. You don't have to flesh much off of them, I guess, and make real tough strings. Now, there's something about rawhide that he knows that a lot of people don't know, that even fools with rawhide. I've always wanted to meet that guy and visit with him to find out. There's a lot of difference in these hides. You'd be surprised. Well, load this in the pickup again, get it where I can get it home, put it in the brine barrel or whatever you want to call it. Scrape this off and be done with it in an hour or so. The first things that I started making out of it was ropes, rawhide riatas. It cost more than I could afford to buy, so I thought, well, I'll just learn to make them. So I did. Lots of guys in the country then that could work rawhide, knew what to do with it, how to make things out of it, and it was cheap. They could do that and didn't have to buy it, you see. But now it's a little different. They don't have so many chances to get rawhide like they used to, and maybe they don't know how to handle it after they got it. You just take an common old cowhide and cut your strings out of it, or calf hide, whatever you want to use. And approximately 8 feet I wrote down there, and there's 8 strings, 49 inches long, That's inches they are, though. 392 inches. Divide 12 into that makes 30, almost 33 feet. The amount of string that it's going to take for this hackamore counts up. I mean, it'll fool you. It's more than you think. These hackamores, when they're finished, are 12 inches inside here. And this string on this button, on the nose button here, takes about 14 feet of string for that, just this button. This string, you can see, is about is wider than I need. And so I'll run that through here between the gauge and the knife to cut it down to the same width. But see that now, that rawhide's working nice because it's just right, just right. See now. Ah, good, now we got her. Well, this is going to be a hackamore. So you stick one end in that vise to hold it tight and steady and start right in the center, is the way I do anyway. So all you have to do is make sure that you go under 2 each time. One thing you do with your braid is try to pull each strand so that they all pull about the same and they stay straight. But you see, it don't take long to braid one. Fella probably wouldn't get very rich at it. Who was? Heck yeah, he handles pretty nice.
There's two main groups, in addition to the ranchers, of course, that have a real history here, and those are the Native Americans, particularly the Paiute, Shoshone, and the Washoe, and then the Basque. And all of those groups have centuries-old folklore. They have music, they have foods, and of course they have the basketry and other kinds of collecting of berries and songs, spirituality, you name it. It's all there.
We met with Master Weaver Sue Coleman in her home in Carson City. A member of the Washoe Nation, she is keeping tradition alive through her baskets. She was raised in Dresslerville on the reservation, where women in her tribe made baskets for everything from cooking to carrying babies. Although her mother, grandmother, and great-grandmother were basket makers, Coleman's interest in this traditional art form did not surface immediately.
You know that I started weaving probably in my late 30s, after my children were raised and I had more time to do it. So basket weaving does consume so much of your time and of your life. So because people are working these days, they don't have time to do it. So when my mother would say to me, "Oh, this, one of your cousins is making beautiful baskets. You need to learn to do this." So I did, and I wove baskets for a couple of years, and then I just stopped. And I guess it was because it was hard on my hands, because your hands are constantly in water, and it was hard on the house because your house is always a mess with willows. So I quit weaving for several years, and my mother kept saying to me, "You need to go back to your basket weaving. You need to start your baskets again." And I would just agree with her. And she had a heart attack about 3.5 years ago, and she called me one morning and said that her heart was racing that night and that she was really scared. So I went to the emergency room and met her there, and they flew her into Reno for surgery. And when I got there and when I saw her again, she wasn't able to talk, but my daughters and I spent the night with her, and I promised her that I would do this for her, that I would carry on the baskets for her. So it was a promise to my mother, and I honor her in that way because she was such a good spiritual person, and just she was a wonderful person, and I wanted to do this for her. And this was a promise to her, and I'm following through with that. And so my children will learn, and my grandchildren will learn also. They're difficult to make, but when you finish them, they're such a source of pride.
Now a master weaver, Coleman has developed the art to near perfection, capturing dozens of first-place honors and Best of Show awards in competitions throughout the West. Her round gift baskets, cradle boards, burden baskets, winnowing trays, and miniatures have been exhibited extensively. Coleman is passing the art on to her own daughter, Cynthia Cannon, and the two were awarded a folk arts apprenticeship in 2001. Coleman has made it her life's passion to keep Washoe weaving alive by sharing her art and knowledge in schools and museums throughout the West.
Groups that are here that I love, just driving through the valley, and you see them, and then you go out and collect them and document them, and you get a real depth there to these people, and that's really what I like about Nevada. And besides some of the arts in the rural areas, there's a lot of urban folk life and urban traditional art. A lot of groups, Hispanic, Thai, Filipino, Japanese, Chinese, many groups, ethnic groups in Las Vegas and all the different urban areas have traditional arts as well, and those are just as important.
And coming up next, an old world musical tradition that's finding an appreciative new home in Nevada. The Russian folk music known as balalaika may be familiar to some listeners from the movie classic Dr. Zhivago. It is full and expressive. In fact, the word balalaika means chatter in Russian, according to Dr. Zeni Ocean, a Reno-based dentist who's helping to establish this folk music in Nevada.
I think it's music that everybody can relate to. I don't know anybody that doesn't enjoy the music. And of course, a lot of young people who haven't been exposed to this music, people from Eastern European cultures have been. The balalaika is a Russian folk instrument, probably representative of Russian culture, particularly from the villages. When we have concerts, it's definitely a family-oriented type of music. Typically here you would have banjos, guitars, and there would be music from Appalachia or bluegrass. And this is Russian bluegrass, I guess. Yeah.
Why balalaika? What is it that appeals to you about it?
Well, my background is Polish, Russian, Ukrainian, and I've essentially been around this music my whole lifetime. And I like all kinds of music. But when I hear balalaika music or Eastern European folk music, it just sends my heart, soaring up. And when I find other people that we can play with, that even makes it more special.
Well, you said it's folk music, and often folk music has costumes and clothing to go along with it. So is the shirt you're wearing typical of the balalaika tradition? Yes.
Actually, the shirt was made by a manufacturer in Moscow, and it's called a rubashka, which means shirt or folk shirt, and the costume is very, very colorful. So when we have a concert, the stage is just filled with people with these colorful costumes, the dancers, the singers, and the musicians as well.
The other thing that strikes me about there's the colorful costumes, but boy, people are smiling a lot when they're playing this music. Does it make you feel good to play?
Oh yeah, we enjoy ourselves when we're on stage, and it's kind of like sharing the music with an audience, sharing it with other people. As I may or may not mention that this music is to be sung to or danced to, and it's a joy. There are sad songs as well. There are melancholy romances. There are marches and there's waltzes and all different kinds of music. But if you talk about choral music, people know what you're talking about. If you talk about jazz, people know what you're talking about. But if you talk about balalaikas, nobody knows what you're talking about. So it's great that you're going to play some numbers that people can hear what this music sounds like.
What would be a really representative piece?
A piece that comes to mind is called Pod de Goy. It's a song about 3 horses pulling this sleigh through the snow. It's called a troika, and it's a lively tune, and you get a chance to hear all the instruments, the basses and the balalaikas and the accordion and like that. So.
Great. Well, we'll hear that and then come back to talking some more. Well, it's a very full, joyous kind of sound. So it seems as if it's probably an instrument you don't really play by yourself.
You could play it by yourself, but typically there's like a duo, a trio, small ensemble. These instruments, this is a prima balalaika. It has a soprano voice. This is an alto domra, which is the same balalaika family. And then we have a prima domra, which is equivalent in voice. We have accordion, flute, clarinet, percussion.
Well, I can see how appealing this music can be. So let's say somebody wants to learn how to play it. How do they do that? I mean, can you go get a video on how to play balalaika music?
It'd be very difficult. There's certain techniques about playing the balalaika that somebody has to show you how to do it. And it's not something you can buy a book and begin to play the balalaika.
And I understand that you actually taught someone through the apprenticeship program at the Nevada Arts Council.
Yes, I had an apprentice. Her name was Judy Roby. She had started playing with our ensemble, but in order to progress, she needed a lot of personal instruction, personal attention. There's a certain way of holding your hands, certain tempos and rhythms, and how you strike the strings. I was very happy that the Arts Council offered this folk arts apprenticeship program, and Judy was too, because in a year's time she became a pretty proficient player.
Is it a strong, growing movement here in the state?
Balalaika music, we're getting quite a following.
Okay. Well, any last word you want to say? Anything else we omitted about balalaika?
Just that if anybody's interested, I'd love to have them give me a call. We welcome new players, and through all my trips to Russia and Ukraine, I've accumulated maybe 70 or 80 instruments. So we have loaners available and instruction too, and it's a lot of fun. A lot of fun.
Well, thank you very much, and we'll play a little bit more of your music here at the end.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
What we do is we support a master artist, and they teach an apprentice. Sometimes it's a group. It could be a performing group of taiko drummers, so that this is preserved, it's documented, and it's passed on. And it's a way of encouraging people to keep doing this. And a lot of times these are partners who are already practicing together. They already have an arrangement. But what we want to do is encourage them to continue it.
Okay, so what if people out there know somebody?
Oh, I bet you a lot of people out there have folk art themselves, or have family members, or know people that are doing something incredible, even if it's a great story that needs to be recorded, or any number of things. And I really wish people would call me. My phone number is 775-687-6680. And please let me know, because we're doing everything we can to record and document everything possible about this state and all of the West, all the traditions that are here.
For more information on Nevada's Folk Life program, please contact the Nevada Arts Council in Carson City or Las Vegas at the numbers below, or visit our website at nevadaculture.org. The Nevada Arts Council supports arts and cultural activities across the state and promotes arts education for the benefit of all Nevadans. The Arts Council is an agency of the Nevada Department of Cultural Affairs, along with the Division of Museums and History, State Historic Preservation Office, and State Library and Archives. To learn more about any of these cultural agencies, please call 775-687-8323 or visit nevadaculture.org. And see you next time on Exploring Nevada.